Today we've got a crazy story of a Redditor using full frontal exposure to get some revenge on their own mom. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, I told you not to press hard. I have ulcerative colitis. I present atypically, and for that reason, I'm often used as a teaching aid for medical students when my consultant has them. I hadn't been feeling particularly good for a couple of weeks and had spoken to the consultant, and we thought it might just be a bug as my bloods were within the acceptable range. I turned up at the session, the students, fourth-year medical students, learning about the gastrointestinal conditions ahead of that rotation. They had a lecture and asked me questions, some thoughtful, some incredibly stupid. Then they got to learn how to palpate someone's stomach to feel for potential issues, given prior surgeries. They always asked about them. I'd been feeling more and more off until Rugby Fella had his turn about 2/3 the way through the queue. He had asked some pretty stupid questions during the session and seemed he wasn't particularly liked among the group. I'd heard him talk about his date that evening after the afternoon session had finished. He stood there talking to the consultant and ignoring me. My body jumped as he touched me with his cold hands and started pressing hard. I gently brought it up with him, stating he didn't need to press that hard to get to what he was looking for, and gave that look to the consultant, and he pressed harder. I warned them I felt like I could vomit. Rugby Fella kept on pressing. I immediately sat up, and my lunch literally covered him from the neck down. I saw him turn a shade of white only even seen when it snows, get a glazed look in his eyes, and look as if he was about to vomit too. I apologized and just said, "I did warn you," wiping the dribbled bits out of my beard. He muttered, "I didn't think you were serious." I smiled. "Weren't you listening when I said excessive pressure on my stomach makes me nauseous? Sometimes it comes out as wind, sometimes foul farts, other times nasty belches, sometimes it's vomit, sometimes it's just bile, sometimes something more." The following students were gentle, and we got through the session as Rugby Fella just stood there wondering what to do. I heard him say quietly as they left, "He can't go on his date like this." For 5 years, the story was told to incoming students for that rotation. Does anybody else feel like OP did one of two things for this guy? Either immediately put a stop to their medical field aspirations, or two, gave them a reason to be way more attentive and much better in their bedside manner. Could you imagine talking to a doctor as they're checking you out and they say, "You know what, when I first started out, I was a lot more inattentive and kind of oblivious. Then I accidentally caused a patient to throw up on me. Never doing that again." Frequently Feral commented on the post, "If that guy is going into the medical field, he needs to get used to bodily fluids, especially if he's not going to listen to patients when they talk to him. If he's going into the gastro field as a whole, he really needs to adjust to vomit, bile, crap, and gas." Of course, everyone in medical has something that icks them, and that's okay. I'm just not feeling very charitable towards him. OP responded to that saying this was their second rotation. Most of them had come from pediatric, oncology, general medical, or ENT from what I was told. I did suggest that he wouldn't necessarily do well in gastro to the consultant, and picked one who I thought may do well in gastro. She's now a junior in the department. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of traumatized people getting some traumatized revenge back, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? Our next story is, I am a betrayer of the white race. To give context, my father was born in Morocco, meaning I have an Arabic-sounding last name. Despite that, I look like your average white dude with possibly a hint of Mediterranean details if you look closely. This was in 2020 to 2021, when the first wave of COVID vaccines rolled around. Me being obese, I was in the priority list for the first dose. I was waiting in the lobby with my mask, my ID, and social security card. Some of the staff working at this moment were not white, but I couldn't tell where exactly their origin was, nor did I care. But the other person next to me, he did care. Drunk out of his mind, he starts blathering about, "We're not in our country anymore. All those sons of Arabs, African plebs, can't trust anyone these days." He then put his arm around my shoulder, shook me like I was an old pal, and said, "We're just you and me against the world. We need to stay strong and together or else we'll get replaced too." With his drunk-induced shaking, I accidentally dropped my ID card. Drunkard says, "I got ya, buddy," picks it up and starts reading. my very Arabic name. He's flabbergasted, shocked like no other, wide eyes and everything you can imagine. A nurse calls my name, I take back my ID, and right when I entered the vaccination room, he screams, "You betrayed me!" like I was Brutus and he was Caesar. Still a hilarious moment in this dark period, where I felt like a spy. At 2 Muhammad? I want to clarify that I chose Muhammad because according to well-known documentary Superbad, it's the most common name in the world. In all seriousness, you gotta love when you can get revenge without really doing anything. And also, it's kind of fun watching a drunkard make a fool of themselves in a not destructive way. I mean, for as hateful as this guy is, at least like it ends in, "You betrayed me," and not, something horrendously worse than that. MNB, the CDO, commented on the post, "For 24 years, my white mother would happily tell everyone who dared say anything negative about immigrants that she was an immigrant. Then they moved to her home country, so now my white dad is the one joyfully inserting himself in conversations about immigrants with, 'I'm an immigrant.'" Our next story is, my English teacher was going to tell my dad he wasn't my hero. So a little background first, my dad cheated on my mom when she was pregnant with me. Then, on my first Christmas, they had a big fight over her travel plans while she was on leave from the Navy. After that, he never contacted us again until my 21st birthday. This has always been a sore subject for me. Now on to the story. My junior year of high school, I had an English teacher who everyone hated. I especially butted heads with her. We were going over the hero's journey and she decided to ask me who my hero was. Not wanting to really interact with her beyond a short response, I said I didn't really have one. Her response was, "Well, I'm gonna tell your dad you said that." I immediately responded, "If you find him, let me know so I can punch him in the face." She tried to act like she didn't hear me, but I knew she did because everyone else reacted to it. She tried to avoid interacting with me after that. I would have loved if OP said that they absolutely hammed it up there. Wait, you have a direct line to him and you didn't tell me this whole time? This is great news. I always wanted to see that jerk face to face. Also, can I just say I absolutely loathe the question of who is your hero and asking your students that. I remember, I think it was 10th grade English class, on the first day they did that stupid thing where they go student by student and the question was, who is your hero? And every single kid had to say out loud an answer. I was like the third kid, and when it got to me, I didn't know what to say, so I just said, my mom. And some girls who are obviously really loud and outspoken on the other side of the classroom start going, "Aww." And I'm just sitting there, social anxiety firing off, my teeth are clenching, I'm like, shut up and move on from me already. She's Insane or Not commented on the post, "I have a similar story. Unlike OP sperm donor, my father was an amazing human being who died young, more than 30 years ago. At some point in the first decade after he died, someone who barely knew me asked, all annoyed about something, 'What would your father say?' And I replied with my best zombie impression." Our next story is, my wife won't stand up, but she will shut you down. So it happened roughly 30 minutes from now, and I knew that it was some r/traumatizethemback material. A bit of context beforehand, my wife, 32-year-old female, and I, 27-year-old male, live near Paris, and often have to travel with the subway for practical reasons. The subways in France have folding seats for people to use, and the common rule there is to stand up when the wagon is crowded so people can have more space. My wife is disabled and suffers from chronic pain that makes her very uncomfortable when she stands up without moving for a few minutes. So she found herself a folding seat for the 20 minutes we had to stay in the subway. The story starts maybe 2 minutes after she found her seat. The wagon started to get filled with a lot of people, and because of that, everyone except her stood up to let people enter it and have a bit more space. But it seemed to be not enough for two decrepit individuals in their 60s that decided to place themselves next to her and started complaining about people not standing up so they can have more place. You know, like it wasn't targeted at her at all. Usually my wife doesn't say much, but this time she was ticked and decided to get at them as much as she could. She opened her bag and showed her CMI. A card for people with mobility issues to pinpoint the fact that no, she can't stand up, and the old couple instantly stopped their nagging by pretending they couldn't see or hear her. So she pointed out that she at least deserved an apology for their rudeness, at which one of the two responded, "But we couldn't know that you were disabled. It's not written on your face." Oh god, my wife tore this person another one right on the spot, stating that 80% of disabilities are invisible and that having to show her card to nasty people without getting any kind of apology was awful enough to endure. And she continued until the two retired dumbwits decided that staying at this place wasn't a good plan anymore and that trying to blend into the crowd behind was a far better idea. Especially since now our side of the wagon was staring at the whole ordeal because of this 4K drama taking place in front of their eyes. Needless to say, nobody heard anything from them afterward, and they left the wagon a few stops after, and my wife stayed on her seat until we had to go, and I made sure to tell her how I'm proud of her. To be fair, if we're all being completely honest, if we walk onto a bus or a public transport option and we see somebody that otherwise looks to be in fairly good shape sitting in a spot like that, don't most of us, at least internally in the back of our minds, have some kind of like immediate little inner reaction to that? And I'm not saying that it's a outwardly shaming thing or hating this person or accusing this person. It's just that person doesn't seem like the kind of person that might usually sit in a place like that. The problem is that disconnect that some people have that would blindly call these people out on something they have no concept of truly, and the rest of functioning society. rGraz65 commented on the post, "I'm an older guy who looks to be in good shape, although too thin, and I'm disabled. Some days I can walk fine, some I struggle very significantly. I was wounded in the Marine Corps and needed extensive surgeries to my left shoulder, chest, hip, and both knees. I've had one person, a middle-aged lady who gave me actual crap for my parking placard, who was walking along with a group and loudly said, 'So many people are misusing and scamming those handicap spots now. It's crazy,' and looked pointedly at me. I replied, 'Well, not all injuries are visible, but mine are.' And then I lifted the left side of my shirt and pulled my pant waistband down just a few inches so she could get a look at the nasty network of scars from shrapnel and surgical incisions that were visible. She had enough self-awareness to flush and cast her eyes aside, while the others in the group either looked at her like, 'You embarrassed us again,' or looked at me, noticed my veteran license plate and said, 'Oh crap, sorry and thanks for your service.'" Our next story is the time my baby sister took down grandpa. In the 70s and 80s, my parents were hippies, and my grandpa, who was a nasty piece of work, hated that. One morning, my sister and I were being babysat by grandma and we're eating breakfast. I'm about 10, my sis about 5. Grandpa comes in and starts with his typical crap, making fun of our dad who wasn't even there. "Your daddy has long hair, doesn't he? You know who else has long hair? Girls. You know what that means? Your daddy is a girl." And on in that vein. I mostly ignored the old fart, but my sister was seething. Finally, she'd had enough and pipes up, "Oh yeah? Well, you're bald, so that makes you a baby." Holy crap, his face turned red, but he didn't say a word. She got him good. She used his logic perfectly and turned it right back on him. He finished his breakfast in silence and headed out to his shop without a single word. So that's the story of the time my nasty old grandpa was verbally shut down by a 5-year-old girl who had the perfect comeback. I mean, she's not wrong. If anything, you feel like it's kind of projection, right? You want to talk about his long hippie hair and how he must be a girl? Well, that's rich coming from you, cue ball. Existing Matter 2134 commented on the post, "That's amazing. Kids have a way of cutting right to the truth in the most brutal and hilarious way possible." Ludwig of the Potato People replied, "Two kinds of people will speak the truth, the drunk and children." Our next story is, "Friend won't stop pushing my child-free boundaries. I'll ruin your freaking dinner." Saw a post recently of a woman whose aunt kept pressuring her about having kids, and it reminded me of my own experience with this. Many years ago, I, 37-year-old female, had my first frenemy. Never had one before, so my autistic butt didn't recognize the issues or patterns in her, and just assumed that my weird brain was picking up on crap that wasn't there. This incident opened my eyes, and I'm so happy to say she's no longer in my life. All the time we knew each other, she spoke about how much she wanted kids and even wanted to adopt in addition to having her own. I thought that was great and a genuinely heartwarming plan. She, however, absolutely hated that I didn't want children. Every few months, she would push the subject. Tell me I was weird, I was broken, I'll change my mind. It irritated the crap out of me, but I never snapped at her over it because she was my friend. I just assumed it was my brain being sensitive and tried to keep the discussions matter-of-fact and civil. Welp, I got sick of that crap after a few years of it. The final throwdown. At our friend's wedding of all places, she decides to ambush me again, this time at the dinner table with my partner, a combination of our other friends and complete strangers who are all trying to hear the speeches. That's when she decided to crack into this old chestnut from across the whole table, no less. I was ticked. I kept my temper and tried to divert her attention back to the whole reason we're there, that whole wedding thing. After poking and prodding and seeing she's getting nowhere, she finally just gets this crap-eating smirk and says, "Well, I hope you get pregnant," and goes to turn back around. What the absolute freak. So she wishes something upon me I have many times said I want nothing to do with? That's when it clicked. Oh crap, she's not my friend. So from across the table, I loudly reply, "Why would you wish I'd have to get an abortion? That's so freaked up to wish on someone." People at other tables heard. She flamed up bright red and after a minute left the table in a fluster. She came back after dinner had already been served, so hers was ice cold. She tried coming at me for how that made her look and what the freak was wrong with me. I blasted her again with every reason I'd given her for years about why I didn't want children. Not that you need any reason to make that decision for yourself, but I have some real good reasons. PTSD and genetic reasons, so why on earth would she wish for me to get pregnant and have a child with a potentially very poor quality of life, or to have to get an abortion? What the freak is wrong with you? The final straw for our friendship was actually when she complained to a mutual friend about me being dramatic over a very real breast cancer scare because she has boob cysts and somehow I don't deserve any sympathy. But that's a whole other story. I really don't want to talk bad about OP, but it's kind of funny how OP had this moment where they realized, oh crap, she's not my friend at the wedding, and yet still involved themselves in this person's life to the point where they had an even worse situation later on that made them finally call quits on the friendship. However, I do want to admit, because I don't necessarily want to be hypocritical, if somebody was mostly a friend to me but also gave me a bit of grief at times, honestly, I myself might have a hard time saying no until there's a few clear bumps in the road like that. Winwood57 commented, "I remember my cousin asking me when I was going to have kids. I said, when the Archangel Michael comes down to speak to me." She backed away slowly. Our next story is the time I traumatized a nosy neighbor with kindness and boredom. This happened years ago. Me and my wife rented a small single-room flat on the top floor of an old townhouse. A nice arrangement for a young couple, except for the lady living below us. She was a real thorn in our side. We immediately started off on the wrong foot because barely a week after we moved in, she knocked on our door to inform us that our toilet is leaking through her ceiling. She dragged us into her apartment to show us the wet ceiling. She was always polite, a seemingly nice lady in her 50s, but somehow full of vitriol. This was a serious problem, and the owners were out of town, so we apologized and arranged a plumber immediately to prevent further damage. The plumber had to break our bathroom floor to check, and there was no leak anywhere. The building manager years later candidly told us that she does this with every new tenant. Maybe to establish some kind of dominance or to collect insurance, who knows. After that, she frequently stopped us to complain about everything. "You were stomping too loud." We had carpet everywhere. "You hammered all day." We put together a small IKEA cabinet in like 15 minutes on an afternoon. Stuff like that. She also liked to complain about other residents. "XY over there is selling drugs, you know." At one time, we had a friend over and she knocked to check if I was at home or if my wife was cheating on me. She was a general menace for 2 years, even though we kept the conversations polite and jovial at all times. The only thing she didn't complain about was our cat. Instead, she creepily insisted that our totally indoor and neutered female cat is the bride-to-be for her male cat that roamed the halls all the time. At one time, she stopped me in front of our door. Yes, she just happened to climb the stairs there and started to explain something, and casually asked where I was born. Yeah, she was racist too, although never against us. And I noticed that she wasn't interested in the answer in the least, and a plan was formed. I started to tell her everything about me in excruciating detail. Where I was from, how I was born. I was a miracle baby, you know. What happened to me when I was 3, how I felt during historic events in my childhood, all in a happy and confidential tone, like we're good friends. Just a torrent of boring personal details and good vibes. I noticed she took a step down the stairs. I took a step down too. She wanted to interrupt. I started another tangent. When we reached the landing on the stairs, I positioned myself in front of her. I kept her for almost an hour. When I ran out of stories, I just started to make crap up on the spot. When I let her go, we had already inched to her apartment door. I assured her that this conversation was so great that she can expect more riveting tales from me in the future. Next time we met in the hallway, I went out of my way to look happy and jogged over to her to chat, but sadly she had urgent grocery shopping to do. Next time, my face lit up as I saw her and waved, and she just fled back into her home. My plan was a glorious success. I scared her away with kindness and boredom for good. She never really bothered us after that. She never risked another story hour with me. We lived there for a couple of years after that. We even got our poor cat out of her arranged marriage. You know, I've been watching a lot of House lately, and this feels like a very House kind of thing to pick up on. I guess maybe by extension, kind of a Sherlock kind of thing to pick up on. Just that little window of opportunity that gave you enough information to know exactly what her Achilles heel was. Oh, she doesn't actually give a crap about anything I have to say. That's the whole thing, that's the ticket. Throwaway UK 4200 commented on the post, "There was a manager I ended up pulling this kind of thing on. He would always be listening out for if me and my colleague were just chatting, as you do at work, at which point he would slide into our office like a snake to interrupt. Now, had he any balls, he would have just said, 'Guys, come on, back to work,' and I would have respected that. But the snake had to do it in a sneaky way. How's that work coming along?" Oh boy, you shouldn't have asked that, Darren. I would then proceed to tell him in excruciating technical detail what I was working on. Software development. I made sure that it was the most long-winded and boring way I could explain it to him, knowing full well he didn't understand anything I was saying. He would just edge towards the office door, and when he placed his hand on the handle, I would say, "Oh, hold on, Darren. You need to hear or see this next bit." Or, "I don't think you understood what I just said. Let me re-explain it." Eventually, he would admit defeat and leave, but he always would attempt to leave the office door open, as his desk was right outside, so he could listen in. I would ask if he was born in a barn. He would laugh nervously. I would just stare at him till he shut the door. This happened multiple times until he realized he was never gonna win. He wasn't even my or my colleague's manager to boot, just a brown nose who specialized in looking busy while not actually providing much value to the business. Our next story is, a stranger put her hand on my pregnant wife's belly. I just discovered the subreddit and had to share. I remember when my wife was pregnant with our first kid, we're at the grocery store when this random woman in the produce section swoops in like she's Gandalf blessing Frodo's journey. She puts her hand right on my wife's belly, doesn't even ask, and goes, "Oh, when are you due?" Without missing a beat, my wife says, "I'm not. I'm just fat. Thanks for that." And for context, my wife is 5 feet 10 inches tall. This lady's face went white immediately. She froze. She didn't apologize. She didn't say another word. And then she just shuffled away, clutching her cantaloupe like it was a security blanket. Meanwhile, I'm over there by the bananas laughing like an idiot because, honestly, if you're bold enough to grab a stranger's stomach, you deserve to walk out of that store questioning every life choice you've ever made. I remember my 7th grade science teacher, who admittedly was a little bit on the heavier side, had in the morning one day during class regaled the class with a story of how she was talking to a coworker and they straight up asked her when she was due. Also, I'm pretty sure she was at least early to mid 40s by that time, so it was already optimistic to ask her that to begin with. It's enough of a thing to ask. It's definitely a whole other to physically put your hand on another person. It's kind of crazy actually how often I've heard that people who are pregnant, their bellies are kind of like a magnet that people think they're just automatically entitled to touch. Victoria Rose 1618 commented, "I was pregnant with twins. Random customer put her hand on my stomach and asked if they were natural. They were, but in what world if they weren't would I want to talk to a random about it?" Icy Stress 6639 replied, "No, they're robots. No, they're man-made. No, they're made entirely out of chemicals. I've never been pregnant with twins, but I did find that with pregnancy, my filters malfunctioned regularly." Lithanarian Aaron 1533 replied, "To be fair, man-made is an accurate description." Our next story is, I breastfeed NICU babies. Karen says it's creepy. I lost my 4th child at 32 weeks, so I had a surplus of milk. Well, actually, colostrum at that point. A wonderful nurse at the hospital informed me that I could donate it to the NICU babies. So I pumped around the clock to donate milk to these precious babies, many of which were one sneeze away from death. I came to drop off some pumped milk and insert cranky Karen. It started innocent enough. She asked how old my baby was, etc. And when I informed her that I was pumping for other babies because mine had tragically passed, she read me the riot act. Apparently, it was disgusting and abusive to feed another woman's milk and she was going to report me. I looked her dead in the eye and told her, "But it's not creepy to steal milk from baby calves to put creamer in your coffee?" She shut up real quick. You know, it's not like it's exactly a brand new idea or anything. Anybody ever heard of the term wet nurse? Honestly, I'm pretty sure that a decent chunk of why humans could survive for thousands of years is the fact that you can support a baby in that way. I think it's okay to hear it and you maybe have some kind of knee-jerk reaction. I mean, it's probably not something that a lot of people really think all too much about, but I would hope that when most people think about it, they realize there's nothing wrong with it as long as OP has a clean bill of health. Crazy Cat CK commented, "As a mom of a premature baby, thank you. Donated breast milk helped feed my baby when my milk was coming in and it kept him strong. Anyone that thinks it's creepy needs to reevaluate how they think." OP responded saying, "The ironic part is women have been feeding other women's babies for centuries. Some species of animals will do it too. I adopted 2 pregnant mama cats and they both nursed each other's kittens." Our next story is, I used full frontal exposure to stop my mother's verbal abuse for good. My mother has always had a bad temper. Since I was young, she would yell the most vitriolic insults, mock me, scream obscenities, etc. I learned that temper from her and would give back the same as she doled out. Then I grew up, left the house, and unlearned the hot temper. So when I had to move back in briefly during my late 20s, I had done a lot of self-work and had a pretty good sense of inner peace. She did not. She would lose her temper frequently and I tried the whole arsenal of tools I knew to disengage. I told her she's being mean and hurting me to no avail. I tried suggesting we talk things through in the morning when her head is cool. Nope. I tried not engaging and just walking away, but she would follow me to my door and slam and scream outside of it. Great. At a certain point, I just started freaking with her and pointing out the flaws in her arguments glibly since I figured I may as well have fun if she's going to be a menace, but that got old fast and did nothing to stop the onslaught. Then, one night, I came out for some water and she got offended because she came in right after looking for a snack and I was in her way, or something truly benign in that same line. She started yelling. I just said I'm going back to my room to sleep and good night and walked away. I got to my room, closed and locked the door, stripped down for sleep, I sleep naked, and got into bed. Then she starts slamming and screaming. My nervous system was entirely calm, but I was incredibly annoyed since I had work in the morning and she just wasn't letting up. So I told her, "Mom, I'm in bed." Naked, ready to sleep. If you keep screaming, I will come out there as I am and you will not like it. She kept screaming. I sighed, flipped up the covers, and opened my door entirely bare and calm. My mother turned a lovely shade of purple I have never seen before and immediately stopped screaming. Then she turned on her heel and walked to her bedroom. She never yelled at me again. I don't know why that worked, but honestly, I love telling the story because something about being calm and naked short-circuited my mother's ability to engage in verbally abusing me. You know, I find it hard to say what exactly could have gone on in the mom's mind that just made them short-circuit and straight up leave. I mean, especially to the point that they never yelled at OP again after that point. Like, either they're all, my kid is totally grown up and I have to respect them now, or there's some other speculative things going on that I just honestly don't feel comfortable talking about. Alaska Guy in DK commented, I wonder if the fact that a grown naked woman was confronting her rather than her child made her realize you are an actual human adult being. OP responded saying, I honestly have no clue what exactly got to her about it, but am open to all theories since honestly I still wonder sometimes how exactly this got her to stop. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy, traumatizing revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.